When I was just 4 or 5 years old, my entire world broke apart. At that age, most kids worry about their first days of school, their favorite toys, or what cartoon will play after dinner. But for me, life had something much heavier in store. At that age, I witnessed my parents' divorce. The memories are blurry, hazy, like a dream you're not sure really happened. But I do remember the shouting. I remember the slamming doors, the tears I didn't fully understand. I was too young to know what divorce meant. All I knew was that whatever home was supposed to feel like, it would never feel the same again. After the divorce, I lived with my dad. He was a strict man, quiet, serious, someone who believed in rules and discipline. But he wasn't unkind. In his own way, he cared for me. He made sure I had what I needed, though not always what I wanted. Still, no matter how much he tried, there was always this empty space inside me, the space where a mother's presence should have been. My mom, well, she was living a very different kind of life. She went through a series of relationships, one after another, a rotating carousel of boyfriends, husbands, and step-siblings. Every time I visited her, it felt like I had to learn new names, new faces, new roles. One month there'd be a stepdad who wanted to play the fun father figure. A few months later, he'd be gone, and there'd be someone else in his place. As a child, I couldn't help but wonder, why couldn't my mom ever just stay still? Why couldn't she ever find stability? But those were questions too big for a child. Maybe he thought if I focused on education, I wouldn't have to struggle the way he did. Visits with my mom, though, they were different. They were unpredictable. Sometimes she was warm and loving, as if I was the most important thing in her world. Other times she seemed distracted, distant, like I was intruding in the new life she was busy building. It was in this strange back and forth between my dad's steady but strict home and my mom's chaotic, revolving door household that another character walked into my life. His name was Norbert, and at the time he was 40 years old. I must have been about 12 the first time I met him. I remember walking into my mom's living room and seeing Norbert sitting there, tall, a little rough around the edges, with that easy kind of smile people use when they want to make a good first impression. To everyone else, he was just Mom's new boyfriend. To me, he was supposed to be another one of those temporary stepdads I'd probably forget about in a few years. But there was something about the way Norbert looked at me that unsettled me, even at 12. It wasn't anything I could put into words at the time, just a stare that lingered a little too long, a feeling that made me shift uncomfortably. At 12 years old, I didn't have the language to explain what I felt, so I brushed it off. I told myself it was just my imagination. After all, he was with my mom. He was the adult. He was safe, right? For the next few years, Norbert was around. They never married, but they were together long enough that I got used to the way he always seemed a little too interested. It was subtle, so subtle I convinced myself I'd made it up. Looking back, my childhood was anything but normal. It wasn't the kind of carefree youth you read about in books or see in movies. There wasn't the laughter of big family dinners, the comfort of stability, or the warmth of unconditional love. Instead, I had two worlds. One, my dad's world, was strict, quiet, and structured. The other, my mom's world, was chaotic, ever-changing, filled with people who came and went like characters in a play. And me? I was caught in between, wanting to belong, wanting to be loved, wanting to be understood. Maybe that's why, years later, I tried so hard to reconnect with my mom. Maybe that's why, even after everything, I still wanted to bridge the gap, to fix what was broken. Because no matter how many stepdads, step-siblings, or family fights there were, a part of me always longed for that missing piece of love from my mother. I didn't know it. When I was 12, Norbert was 40. At first, he was just another one of my mom's boyfriends. By then, I had seen so many men come and go from her life that I almost stopped bothering to learn their names. But there was something different about him. He wasn't loud or mean. Not the kind of man who tried to win us kids over with gifts or fake charm. Instead, he was quiet. Almost too quiet. He would sit in the living room, watching TV, barely saying a word. But even in his silence, I always felt his eyes on me. At that age, I didn't know how to describe it. I just knew it made me uncomfortable. When I'd sit on the floor drawing or flipping through magazines, sometimes I'd look up and find him staring. Too long. Too steady. He'd smile, but not in a warm, fatherly way. It was the kind of smile that made my stomach twist. Of course, I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, he was an adult, and adults were supposed to be safe. Besides, my mom seemed happy with him. She laughed more when he was around, and that was rare. If I complained, she probably would have told me I was being dramatic. So I stayed quiet. For the next few years, Norbert was part of the background whenever I visited my mom. We weren't close, but he was always there. He'd ask me little questions sometimes, about school, about my friends, but even those small conversations felt off. There was always this weight in the air, like he wanted to say something else but stopped himself. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. My mom and Norbert broke up. No big fight that I knew of, no dramatic ending, just silence. One day he was part of her life, and the next he wasn't. I was relieved, though I never admitted it to anyone. For a while, life went back to its usual chaos. My mom found someone else, then someone else again. I got older, became a teenager, went through my rebellious years, skipped school, got in trouble, tried to figure out who I was while juggling the confusion of two households. But sometimes, late at night, I would remember the way Norbert had looked at me, the way his eyes lingered, the way his smile never reached his eyes. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. He was gone, out of my mom's life, out of mine. Still, a part of me wondered, had I imagined it all? Or was there something darker there all along? I didn't know it at the time, but Norbert wasn't really gone. By the time I turned 19, my life was finally starting to change. I'd been the troubled kid for so long, the one who skipped school, argued with adults, and stormed out when things got too hard. My family, especially my mom's side, saw me as a troublemaker, a black sheep. But I was tired of carrying that weight, tired of being the kid nobody believed in. So I made changes, slowly at first, but steadily. I got a job. I focused on building stability instead of chaos. I cut ties with the mistakes of my past and tried to become the kind of person I wanted to be. By 21, I was working a good office job, something steady, something that gave me pride. And most importantly, I found love. My fiance wasn't flashy or perfect, but he was safe. He was kind. He was the first person who looked at me and didn't see the troublemaker. He saw me for who I really was, and he loved me anyway. That kind of acceptance is rare when you grow up the way I did. Not long after, I found out I was pregnant. 6 months in, my whole life felt different. Every kick, every flutter reminded me that I was building a new chapter, a new family, one that would be mine, one that wouldn't break apart the way mine had when I was little. But with pregnancy came something else, a longing. Despite everything, I wanted my mom back in my life. I wanted my child to know their grandmother, to have a bigger family. I wanted to fix what was broken between us. Maybe it was naive, but I believed motherhood might finally bring us closer. So I reached out. I told her about the baby. And to my surprise, she came to visit. She drove up with some of my siblings, and for the first time in years, we all sat down at the same table for dinner. It was awkward at first, yes, but there were moments, small flashes, where it felt almost normal. We talked about the baby, about my hopes for my child. I wanted them to grow up surrounded by love, not chaos. And then, casually, as if it were nothing, my mom dropped a bombshell. She told me she was back with Norbert. I remember freezing, my fork halfway to my mouth. Norbert. A name I hadn't thought about in years. A ghost from my past suddenly back in the room, even though he wasn't there. She didn't just say they were together again. She said they were getting married. I smiled politely, nodded, pretended it didn't bother me. But inside, that uneasy feeling from my childhood came flooding back. His eyes, his stare, that smile. Why him? Why again? The night ended, and she prepared to drive home. But before leaving, she asked me a simple favor. Her phone was acting up, and she wanted me to send Norbert a message. It started with a simple message. When my mom asked me to text Norbert, I didn't think twice. I typed, "Mom's on her way home. Her phone is acting up." I expected a short reply, maybe "thanks" or "got it." But instead, Norbert used that tiny opening to slide back into my life. At first, it was harmless. He asked if it was true I was pregnant. He wanted to know if I'd married my fiance yet. Strange questions, yes, but nothing too alarming. I answered politely, thinking maybe he was just making conversation. But then his tone shifted. He said he had never forgotten me. He reminded me of a day years ago when I was 12, lying on the living room floor during one of my visits. He said he remembered how pretty I looked, even then. I froze. My stomach dropped. This wasn't small talk. This was something darker. Still, I didn't stop him right away. I didn't encourage him either. But shock kept me quiet. I answered with simple words, "Oh," or "What?" while he kept talking. And he did keep talking. He confessed that the only reason he had gotten back with my mom was because of me. That all those years ago, I was the one he really wanted. That sleeping with my mother was just a way to be close to me. The messages got worse, more explicit. All those years. But instead, the nightmare only deepened. My mom didn't believe me. She said I had led him on. My siblings backed her up, claiming I was jealous, dramatic, a homewrecker. Some even accused me of trying to steal him away just because I was pregnant and looking for a way out. It didn't matter that I had proof. It didn't matter that my fiancé witnessed it all. To them, the villain wasn't Norbert. It was me. A few days later, the final betrayal came. My mom and Norbert went to the courthouse and got married. Married, despite everything. Married, despite the screenshots. Married, despite knowing exactly what he had said to her daughter. And when I tried to fight back, when I shared the messages with extended family, they accused me of faking them, of stirring up drama, of seeking attention because, in their words, I didn't want anyone else to be happy. Even my dad. Even some of my siblings. They told me they wouldn't come to see my baby unless I apologized, unless I admitted I was lying. That was the moment it sank in. Norbert hadn't just stolen my safety. He had stolen my family. And all because I dared to tell the truth